All right, let's get into, speaking of grifters, I want to get my last segment done, and then we can do some more chill and talk to the chat room for a little bit. So, I've been criticizing, I've been critiquing, I've been, using words constructively to try to make people that are more popular than me in the same space that I inhabit more aware of what the things that they're saying are. So, I've talked about Ryan Knight a couple times. Yesterday, I did a story about how Ryan Knight, Jimmy Dore, and some other people planned, with the People's Party, mostly Nick Brana of the People's Party, planned this big anti-AOC campaign around Force the Vote. So that was exposed yesterday, and Ryan Knight's been he's been kind of do some damage control here, and he tweeted out something that I find absolutely bonkers and bizarre. And it just proves that this guy really doesn't understand the space that he's in. And that's fine. And I want to say that explicitly. If Ryan Knight wants to read a book, great. He should read a book. When I first got into politics, before I started my show, what I did is I read a bunch of books, as many books as I can. I listened to as many different podcasts as I can, listened to audiobooks, watched documentaries. I wanted to know what I was talking about, at least a little bit, before I started a political show. And it's fine if you don't want to do that. That's fine. But if you've got a platform with 360,000 people, right, chances are you should know what a term like democratic socialist means. Like, if you are having 360,000 followers and you don't know what the term democratic socialist means, I mean, I don't know. At that point, there's like an interesting situation to comment on. So, Ryan Knight tweets this out. This is, again, after he got exposed for participating in an organized anti-AOC grift campaign. After that was exposed, by the way, he exposed that on accident, which is really funny, but after that was exposed, he goes on Twitter to try to do a victory lap. So he says, according to AOC, you can be a capitalist and a socialist. I disagree. And before AOC stands go crazy in the comments, I don't dislike AOC at all. I think she's helped shift the conversation on what is possible, but she is no longer a firebrand or a radical. So I want this to be understood. Ryan Knight is talking about himself here. Ryan Knight a year ago was an Elizabeth Warren supporter who hated AOC, right? So when he says that she's helped shift the conversation to what is possible, but she is no longer a firebrand or radical, that is textbook projection. And again, there's no problem with that. If you start off as an Elizabeth Warren person and you turn in to be leftier than AOC, that's great. That's wonderful. But you have to understand that in your analysis. So, again, you can be a capitalist and a socialist. Being a socialist was never in this conversation. This conversation is a clip of her talking about democratic socialism, right? Which is not socialism. There are different words for that for a reason. Democratic socialism. Now, again, we can have a huge conversation about, well, technically, what they're referring to when they describe democratic socialism is social democracy, but, we can have that whole conversation. But either way, the point is she did not say socialist. Let's listen.
You have said you are a democratic socialist. Can you be a democratic socialist and a capitalist?
Well, I think it depends on your interpretation. So there are some democratic socialists that would say absolutely not. There are other people that are democratic socialists that would say, I think it's possible.
What are you?
I think it's possible.
So again, now, I don't know what the context is preceding or succeeding this clip here. But again, she's not talking about socialism. She's talking about democratic socialism, which, in my opinion, is a milquetoast, really kind of cringy brand. Personally, I think DSA would be a lot better if it were just a socialist association or organization or whatever. What is it? Or Democratic Socialist. It would be way better if they were just Socialists of America. Like, democratic socialism, I don't know. To me, it's just kind of like a centrist. It's like, okay, you figured out what socialism is. You figured out what communism is, but you're still kind of too afraid to take that final step. That's what it seems like for me. I was a democratic socialist for a couple weeks, and I was like, all right, I get it. It's over. I'm a communist now, right? And so I think that's the natural evolution of these things. Now, however, that being said, whether or not it's a good thing that Bernie Sanders decided to mainstream the term democratic socialism, and again, when he says that, he kind of mostly meant social democracy, and that's a whole big thing, right? But these terms have meanings, right? to be a democratic socialist or a social democrat and being a capitalist, those are not necessarily conflicting, because in and of itself, democratic socialism is a compromise between capitalism and communism. That's what that is, or socialism, whatever term you want to use instead of communism. That's what that is. It is a middle ground, and by being a middle ground, by the simple fact that it is a middle ground, it has to incorporate parts of each ideology, right? And if that's your thing, and it's like you want to go for that middle ground and you think capitalism is okay sometimes, personally, I disagree. I think capitalism is okay. Never is capitalism okay, especially after the history of this fucking world and planet that we live on. But that's just my opinion. If you are a democratic socialist, of course it's possible to be a capitalist and a socialist. That's literally your ideology. Instead of saying you're a socialist, you're saying you're a democratic socialist. Why are you adding extra syllables in front of your political ideology unless those extra syllables translate to something that means something? So again, if Ryan Knight is a socialist, that's great. But he should not be utilizing these words and lying about what AOC says. Like, again, if you want to, say that he said this without the, clip attached, okay, it would have been a better tweet. But he attaches a clip and then just incorrectly captions it, and it's just bizarre. It's weird. And it just goes to show that this guy doesn't quite know what the definitions he's talking about are. And, again, I don't hate him. I don't hate anybody. Well, I do hate Jimmy Dore, to be honest. I think I've given him enough strikes as far as I'm concerned. But I don't hate any of these people. But they're way more popular than me, and they say things that are way dumber than me. If some dumb bitch with 8,000 YouTube subscribers knows what these terms mean, and someone with 360,000 Twitter followers doesn't, I think that there's a problem there. And so I'm going to speak up about that, because, personally, I think that, personally, I think it's something we should talk about. And now that Bernie is out of the picture, we got to move on from democratic socialism. I'm sorry. Communist, anarchist, socialist, good, right? Whatever word in those that you want to use, like anarcho-communist, anarcho-syndicalist, that's all good stuff. Democratic socialist, social democrat, Come on. This isn't 2015. This isn't 2016. Let's get our shit together, because guess what? We got Joe Biden in office. Now, people like to say, is Joe Biden going to be FDR, the modern day FDR? Well, FDR was a centrist Democrat. A lot of people don't know that. Again, when the Democratic Party was also the party of racism and slave owners. FDR was a centrist Democrat. He locked up Japanese Americans in concentration camps. This guy was not a radical. The only reason why we got things like the New Deal was because we had organized labor power in the form of communists and anarchists that wanted to destroy the government. They wanted to revolt against the government. And people like FDR placated them just enough to prevent a revolution. So, is Joe Biden a modern day FDR? We can't make that calculation until we do the work required to test that thesis. Whether or not Joe Biden is the modern day FDR does not hinge on Joe Biden, does not hinge on AOC, does not hinge on the Democratic Party. What it hinges on is our ability outside of electoralism to organize for that future. That's what it hinges on. And I think podcasters like Ryan Knight are making that a little bit more difficult to comprehend. Anyway, hopefully that was a little good monologue there. I don't mean to sound like a little, like a preacher. Though maybe I should sound like a preacher. I don't know. Am I good at preaching? Should I continue to preach? What do you think?